Maybe one question, if anybody. No? Any questions? I'll take one from the floor. We've got a little bit of time. Oh, yep, there we go.
Andrew Craig, asking you how, with a lot of burning happens either early and some late, how do the cattle get on for having enough tucker, or do they have to reduce their numbers of cattle to sort of balance it all up?
I think I was the leader of the pasture, but where we are with the closest pastoralist we have is Country Downs. Now, they sort of do their burns a bit later in the year because of grass. When we do our sort of burns, we kind of make sure that it does not try to not impact their area. And so far it's been really good. I think that's why DFES kind of does some early season burns around the pastoral's boundaries that meet ours. So I think that kind of answers your questions. Yeah.
Can I just add to that? Up in Bari, Jawi country, we don't have much cattle. What I can say is that maybe we've been doing a lot of good fire management, and now there's a lot of cattle coming up.
That's good.
Sorry. So, yeah, good answer. Sorry, was there another one or no? Well, I'll take one more and then, yeah.
My name is Maya. I work for the Department of Ag in WA. It just seems like you guys are doing some great work, and you're improving the value of the land. You're having trouble with funding, yet you're improving the value of these pastoral leases. There could be a capacity there for people to support that through those pastoral leases. In the future, I don't know, but you're benefiting that production side. So
yeah, well, I think just fall back with Country Downs, they have been pretty involved with us since the group was created. When it comes to that, and this is another question, but yeah, I mean we've talked about supporting them and their burns, and they support us as well. But at the moment, it's kind of not there yet. But yeah, maybe in the future.
And I guess that's why we want to do these measurements and stuff, so then we can start to back ourselves, so we can start to try and get that funding to show what work we were doing. And yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. And one more really great work. And obviously, the power of data collection, and obviously very evident in the work that they've been doing through what the information is showing. The last presentation. So we have Miss Julie Melbourne, the manager of the Nyambulburi Yarro Environmental Service Unit. Julie's a colleague of mine. I'm not too sure if I'm joining into this presentation, but I'm happy for her to have the reins. So Julie holds a Bachelor of Laws. She's currently the manager of the Nyambulburi Yarro Environmental Service Unit since 2011. The Nyambulburi Yarro Environmental Service Unit looks to install the vision of Mabo Buru, healthy country, Mabo Ngarangol, strong community, Mabo Lian, good well-being, good feeling. Julie and the environmental service team recognise the Yarra community wish to protect these values and are developing tools and knowledge systems for the holistic and sustainable management of the station in Yarra Land and Sea Country. For those that might have been on the tour yesterday, obviously we talked a little bit about some of the management that we're doing on the station, and obviously full credit to our ranger team that hosted the on-country site visit and talked about some of the great work we're doing around groundwater monitoring, protecting cultural sites on the station, and important wetland systems. But further ado, let me put together your hands and welcome Julie to the stage. So, Julie Melbourne.
Thanks, Dean. I'm actually presenting here on behalf of the Environmental Services Unit and the team. acknowledge Dean, who's been my long-term colleague and assistant manager of the unit. Tom Andrews, IPA coordinator, country managers, Gaydar, Vaughan, Des, Ron, Romania and Kiani, and the training and project officer, Mon Edgar. And as Dean said, the team presented yesterday and I think did a fabulous job. I think anyone that was there really learnt a lot about the work that we're doing on Roebuck Plains. I firstly want to acknowledge the Yawuru traditional owners, the elders past and present, and the emerging leaders, some of which are, all of which are in my team. And they're an amazing team. So I thank you all for the work that you do in what we're trying to achieve. My task was made a little bit easier today because some of the slides that that I've got in my presentation was also included in the presentation earlier. So I'm not going to linger on this one, just to say that highlight in 2016 was when the Indigenous protected area was dedicated over significant areas of Roebuck Plains Station, that being significant wetland and spring systems and cultural sites. And then in 2022, Yawuru took over the management and ownership of the cattle business. So bringing together the conservation and cultural management with the management of the business and the cattle. Again, we're working in the cultural framework that Nini outlined this morning, and forgot to put my clock on. And also we're operating now in the context of the Gumaranjal strategic objectives for the station. Our key involvement in those pillars is obviously around the environmental, culturally sensitive protection and management of country. However, there's a lot of overlap, and what we're trying to achieve is developing data and tools and technology that can inform the management of the cattle as well as the cultural and conservation management. So we're aiming not to act in isolation and to try and bring all those facets together. And we sit on an operations committee for the operations of the station, so we have opportunity to bring some of those matters to the table and work collectively and collaboratively to deal with those. And we're also involved in the up-and-coming ecologically sustainable rangelands management planning review, which we undertook several years ago with the station, that incorporated all the values of the IPA in that plan. So just to quickly highlight that we're in a very unique set of circumstances whereby Yawuru now own and operate the station. We have exclusive native title over that station by a unique provision in the Native Title Act. We have an internationally listed Ramsar site on the shores of Roebuck Bay, adjacent to the station. We're in joint management, whereby we have all the coloured areas. We're in joint management with Department of Environment and the Shire of Broome in the in-town areas, and most particularly with the Department of Environment for the marine park. So we have, and then overlaying all the jointly managed conservation areas is the IPA. So not only does the IPA exist over those important parts of the station, but also overlays and collaborates with our joint management functions, operations and partnerships. So particularly there, you see the Marine Park is adjacent to the Roebuck Plains station, so very critical that we take a holistic view of that living landscape, and Yawuru people see that as a living landscape, and what happens in this hinterland is going to affect this marine park. And the marine park has been sustaining Yawuru people and other Aboriginal people for millennium. And in addition, there's tourism, recreational fishers, so it's a really critical hub and hotspot for Broome, and so it's really important from that perspective as well, that this holistic management is really taken up seriously. And our board, as you saw with the objectives, does have that commitment to that holistic management. As part of that, just in this presentation, just going to touch very briefly on some of the key projects that add to the data and the information that help inform that holistic management. Dean, I invite you to jump up anytime. Using cultural knowledge and Western science, we have a lot of partners that we're working with in these projects. This one, just wanted to highlight this, some people will have seen this yesterday, but back in 2014, this was the state of Mimiagaman, which was a key ecological and cultural site for Yawuru people. And so we fenced that area, got some funding and fenced it, and we've been monitoring it ever since, and you can see the change that's happened on the right-hand side photo there over time from 2014 till it's probably even much more overgrown than that photo shows. But that's been a really critical project, and we have 4 or 5 other wetlands that are have been fenced and monitored in the same way. And this again is referencing the wetland we went to yesterday, but all the wetlands have been fenced, and over time there's been a methodology developed with our partners UWA, and these posters have been developed which identify what the methodology is for monitoring, and then adding in the results and the data that has been found over time. And so each monitoring session we're able to add an update to these posters as to what the last lot of monitoring has shown. We've also now produced graphs so we can see over a number of years what the change has been. And this importantly also is including a Leon score. So people, the country managers will, after assessing the other monitoring efforts, look at it and give it a sort of a Leon score as to how they think, what they think the health of the wetland is. And there's a number of those posters for all the different wetlands that exist across the IPA, and they're the key Zone 1 areas of our IPA area management. We're also undertaking a range of other groundwater monitoring. Yawuru have obtained a H3 water licence, and so there's compliance monitoring that has to take place with that, and there's a strong set of baseline data being developed and gathered. Country managers are increasing their capacity and are taking over that program of monitoring. And also through the Department of Water, doing some other ecological and groundwater monitoring. So essentially we're building up this strong body of knowledge about groundwater movement and through flow, so that when there is another project, an agricultural project that comes along, we'll have that data to assess impact. We have a sustainable grazing project that we're reassessing. It's looking at enclosures, fenced and unfenced, over time. And we're using also a drone to monitor each time that happens, looking at greenness, bare ground. But, and that's also based on the premise of trying to get a balance between impact of cattle, conservation, and what's the methodology and the information that's needed to enhance that. But I guess the key elements of where we're thinking, how do we bring all this data and monitoring that we're undertaking together? And so we're looking at a system of the sea and ecosystem accounting, which Anthony introduced this morning in his paper. It's an opportunity to bring consistent standard for regular integrated reporting on ecosystems, and it also can link environmental, economic and cultural management outcomes. And there's now about 96 countries across the world that are developing these systems to bring in an environmental accounting valuing system. But in Australia it's hasn't developed very far, and it's certainly lagging in bringing in any perspectives from a First Nations position. So we're working in a partnership with the ANU, and we're undertaking a pilot project where Yawuru and the monitoring that we're doing will develop and form a case study. There's a committee will be formed based on, backed up by the United Nations, to look at how to develop environmental accounting that will bring in Indigenous values that will be useful and informative for Indigenous communities. So Yawuru are in the best position to undertake a case study of this kind, because we are already managing and responsible for all the values on Roebuck Plains. And so our proposition is to bring all those values together to be able to monitor, measure, and over time be able to see change that incorporates not only ecological change but also cultural change. And that we will be able to then manage the benefits and bring into an adaptive management decision making, so that we get to a point of seeing a problem and then being able to adapt our management decisions. So just quickly, a lot of it will be based on just pulling data that already exists off satellites, as well as data that we are collecting in our projects and our monitoring. And so that's a water reflection, that's a wet season and a dry season. There'll be a dashboard. The map up the top is a Roebuck by paddocks that is intended to have the ability to click on a paddock and you'll be able to come up with the information that will show change in vegetation, bare ground, grassland over the whole paddock. And so over time, whatever time frame you might want to choose, you'll be able to monitor how the management is impacting and also in particularly how climate change might be being reflected in those changes. It also will apply to fire, and you can see that it ties in with what Aston was talking about from the Fire Peninsula Working Group, where since the early season fires have been instituted, then the late wild season fires have reduced. And again, you'll be able to click on any area over Roebuck and be able to see what that data is telling us in terms of fire. We'll also be able to use this for threatened species and other key factors, pastures that will assist us in our environmental management, but also to inform the station. It is very new. There's a workshop happening in December where I understand there's people been invited from overseas to really start to look at how to use this environmental accounting, but also how to recognise First Nations values in the systems. That's just another reflection of how you might see change over time. And that's a fairly simple diagram that is linking Leon's score with poor, okay, good, very good, with the what the landscape is looking like. And so it's, as I said, it's an early iteration, but we're really hoping that we'll be able to take some good steps to bring in First Nations information and value into an environmental accounting system over Roebuck. And yeah, in the broader relevance, it will demonstrate explicitly how land is being used and the threats and trade-offs. And will show how land changes under various factors, for example, MBY's management and strategies are changing, and in the pre and post native title and climate change characteristics. So that's my last slide. I've just been given time's up, so. I think I got more nervous as time went on.
Thanks, Julie. Don't go too far, because there might be, we probably got a little bit of time up our sleeves here, Matt. What's lunch at 12? About 10 minutes. Probably a couple of questions for Julie, and might get our presenters back up here, and if there's any questions for our presenters, we have a bit of time up our sleeve. 10 minutes or so. 10 minutes. So yeah. Great. So we'll have a photo of everybody. One down the back there with the microphone. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, so will your monitoring be able to assist the grazing operation with pasture budgeting and stuff like that as well?
I can't see you, sorry. Oh, Early days. We are starting to work more closely with the station. At the moment, obviously, the station management and budgets is not within our world, but we hope that the information and the data that we're collecting and providing can be analysed in such a way that it can feed into that. Feel free.
Yeah, look, that's the intention, is the hope from the monitoring program and the work that the Environmental Service Unit is doing within the Indigenous protected area, but more broadly in the station. Hopefully, that the idea is that the feedback into management and them to uptake, that data and information. So it's quite a unique system where Indigenous protected area and the monitoring through that is feeding back up and contributing to our broader understanding of what's happening within the station, then sort of working in with the station management around, when they're setting their feed budgets in their pastoral operation for the year, it's about then how do we work together in that space.
Yeah. I think the important thing is creating the linkages so that the understandings are there across, and if we're seeing impact somewhere, that can be fed back and vice versa.
It's probably a question to, Raymond Stacey, RCS. Probably a question to all. I'm just hearing a lot about monitoring, and it seems we're unpacking it, and we're making what is a complex situation incredibly complicated. How do we repack that to bring it into some more simple measures? And it's a question to everyone here on the monitoring side.
Are you talking about indicators or...?
Indicators and that sort of thing, and so far as Roebuck goes, there was one thing jumped out at me at this morning's presentation. We're 2,000 head overstocked, and that really jumped out at me as a land manager and a stock manager. And I look at photos there and I think, yep, okay, I can see both sides of a fence. So we're looking at. I just get a feeling somewhere along the line that we're getting things complicated. And how do we make it more usable?
When you've got some thoughts on that, we're happy to have a conversation. I mean, with the sustainable grazing monitoring, we've started off with an idea of wanting to see impact between cattle in, cattle out, just as a visible impact, so that we could then, think further about that and how we might have a role in reducing that impact, particularly on our conservation areas. But I think with David, we had a very productive visit with him, and we've obviously thinking that the methodology is not really taking us very far, and we need to review that, and what are we trying to do, and what are the questions we're trying to answer. So with the other monitoring we're doing, the wetland and the other water monitoring, I think we've got an ability to analyse that in a very clear way. So I think we're kind of on track with that. But do you want to add in?
Yeah, look, and I think, we're coming from land managers, not pastoralists. So the journey, it's been a journey about capacity building, because we're entering a new space in pastoral activity and managing the mouths that grazing. So we're coming, we're coming from the environmental cultural perspective and managing first and foremost that because it's, as Nini alluded this morning, it's a living cultural landscape for us first and foremost. We have to protect those cultural sites that we have obligations to. Secondly, it's the environment, that ecosystem that we need to understand how does it function, and the functionality of that over various climatic events, and then obviously, with those climatic events you have flooding, and then all of a sudden you can't get back out in the muster, and then the flow-on effect. So a lot of this is about the journey that we've been on. It's about a journey, capacity building of us entering a new space, and the model itself, we're monitoring, but I think the question is, what are we monitoring, and how do we get better in our monitoring projects? So, that's as we're building capacity, and inviting people like RCS out to the station and learning about regenerative agriculture, and how do we use the mouths to control the grazing aspects. So.
Yeah, this is a comment that I was actually prompted to ask this or make this comment based on what you just said, and I could be shot down for saying this, but as a first contact with the Leanne score, and I think this comes back to Bhutan's gross domestic happiness indices and things like that, that you can be, I think what I'm trying to say is that it's an emotive argument, and having a Leanne score, this gets cut through. I think the comment I was hearing was that we're unpacking and unpacking and unpacking, monitoring and monitoring. For me, having first contact with that, it gets cut through to country and what people are seeing. And you go to any pub in the wheat belt in any part of the world, or any farming community, and you see the cars parked out in the car park, there's emotional decisions that people make about their car. Every single car brand is there, but they're all farming. But there's different choices that are being made. I know it's a bit random, these examples I'm giving you, but it's emotional, and that's what gets cut through. And monitoring, yes, we will be cut down and by just having emotive arguments to underpin the work we do, but that's what gets the greatest cut through. And maybe a comment on that.
I think Anthony talked a bit this morning about the natural capital accounting dealing with that as an asset, the landscape and the country as an asset, but also the ability to add assets, other assets as value add, or in addition to, sorry, that's mine. Talk too long. And I think from a First Nations perspective, and bringing all their information and analysis of their country has to sit with the cultural sort of values as well to make it whole. And so I think adding in the cultural elements it probably is emotional, but it's also got a real value to it, particularly for First Nations people, as part of the asset system of natural capital, natural and cultural capital.
I might just invite those other speakers. We've got probably 5 minutes if you guys did want to come up, or people did have questions, further questions for those presenters that we mightn't have had the opportunity to ask a question to. So just allowing the space. But if there isn't any takers or any more questions in relation to, sorry? And we can direct them to our presenters if there need be. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. Oh, sorry, I don't have the presenter list, so I don't have names, but there was a couple of presentations, both were really good, talking about improving the pasture composition of rangelands. One was the Burdekin talking about using controlled fire management to do that, and the other was the Blue Bush experience using grazing pressure management to improve the composition of the pasture species. Does anyone know if there's scientific research underway comparing, the benefits of using each, either or both combined, of controlled fire management and or grazing pressure management for pasture composition?
Interesting question. I might, if our previous presenters might be able to answer that, or are they...
So you're talking about the pasture composition with using cultural fire and grazing landscapes? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was really interesting. You talked about the improvement in some grazing landscapes from the control of fire. There's also another way of achieving that goal with the grazing pressure. I'm interested in the relationship between the two, pros and cons.
Well, our project sort of goes into using cultural fire and doing the right fire on a pastoral property to maximise feed growth and also open up country for cattle to use. So in saying that, it's like, how do you explain that? Yeah. Well, you do the burn first, and it was like we did the burns first, and then we sort of left it up to pastoral owners if they were going to do cell grazing or use that paddock. But normally we just use it for a fire to open it up first, and then they have other paddocks that they use for their cattle. And then when it's open for pastoral use and you actually got feed growth in there, then they run the cattle through there. Yeah, you come up and have a yarn too.
So we were working on 2 properties and we had different management issues on each property. So, and we trialled a different fire regime, I don't want to use regimes because it was cultural fire, but they looked at it and worked out a different plan for each area. So one area was woody thickening, and so that was about acacias taking over and trying, because there hadn't been fire used there. Also, both of the properties, go back a bit, both of the properties have been clear felled. As you know, that was a lease requirement back in however many years ago, that you had to clear fell the property, otherwise you didn't have your lease extended. So that was a government requirement. So both of those properties had that done quite extensively. And then there's been a number of other requirements to keep your lease over the years. So a lot of them, well, both properties had the woody thickening issue, and that was one of the main things that we were addressing, because that was widespread across the region, because the majority of the region in areas had clear felling done. And then there was the stick and rake approach to tidying up those areas, or putting in roads, or then having to put in fire breaks because you were scared of wildfires. And that was another thing that was blanket put out across the region, was you want to, protect yourself from wildfires, stick and rake, and put in fire breaks, and that's how you manage it, as well as them not having fire applied. So the woody thickening was our major one, and we did do land condition assessments and soil monitoring and all those things just to back that up. The other one was on weeds and looking at bringing back native grasses species to make the area more resilient in times of drought. And there is a number of different research that's been done in the region from, he's not here, Bob, but from Department of Fisheries and Agriculture. So we're working in with a few of those things and looking at the pasture regrowth on those sites. Does that?
It helps. It's all relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might just hand it over to Kunzi.
We can.
I guess for us, for every property, it's different, and not burning at our place was the right thing for our cattle in our country. And we had a small place. We didn't have the issue where it was massive. So Gina and I had full control over the pasture there and the fire and everything. So it depends on the size sometimes and what works for you. Up here we've got a block at Adelaide River. Everyone burns in Adelaide River. Gina and I don't burn. The only time we get burned is someone else starts the fire. But our cattle in Adelaide River, we have a really small place, but they go really well on not burning. So we found that works for us and how we want to manage our country. So lots depends on who you are and how you want to do it.
I guess it's the business that you're in as well. Like, we're in the business of growing cattle and that sort of thing, so we want grass. And keeping our grass, and with just using our cattle to churn up the country, and then, leaving all that dead fodder, they're turning it back through. And with the rotation of our cattle, we had a tight rotation program at Bluebush. We're doing 14 days. So we moved our cattle every 14 days. We only had 10,000 acres, and we had 500 head. So, and that worked for us. And you'd go back through 30, 60 days later and look at those paddocks that we've just moved out of, and we had growth coming through again, even on that real low rainfall. So, yeah, it just depends, I guess, on what sort of, what do you want from your country and what business you're in.
Great. Yeah, one more. I've just been given the time up, but yeah.
I just remember the question asking, is there any research projects out there or studies being done? And I guess what is quite clear, not only in the drought conversation, but water conversation and climate change holistically, is that First Nations people have always been left towards the end. We're starting to see more emphasis around, you know, we need better engagement with First Nations people. We're starting to see that. The government expects that, and that's what we're trying to do in different areas. But I think it also plays or says that that's why we have limited research to showcase why burning on country is evident and why it supports health and wellbeing and caring for country. So just to give that context as well.
Thank you.
I think that was the important point, is that there's every part of country has a different requirement. When you walk across the road and it's different to, and that's the important thing that we found, was rebuilding all those skills of reading country, and that's why we did bring in the graziers that own the property and the traditional owners, because they have the recent history knowledge, and the traditional owners have the broader knowledge, and that bringing those two together was really valuable. But there's no recipe, and that's frustrating for us, because people want to, just give us the recipe, and we want to replicate it on our property, and it's not that simple. It takes a lot of time and
effort.
reading country before you can go.
Well, I'll wrap up the session, but thank you to everybody who presented today, to everybody who attended the session as well. It's been a great conversation. I think there's, hopefully from a Indigenous perspective, we see more, I suppose, inclusion in the next Rangelands Society conference, I suppose, in the context of what role Indigenous First Nations people are playing. Obviously, from the breadth of the presentations today, there is some really exciting work happening on country. So yeah, look, just put your hands together for those presentations, and thanks. Yeah. Thank you. Cheers, man. Oh, actually, if we could get all of the presenters up here, and we might just have a group photo. Thank you.